Thanks to Hostinger for sponsoring this video. Are you looking for a reliable and affordable VPS hosting? Hostinger offers an exclusive Black Friday deal on their VPS subscription plan. You can get a 12-month VPS hosting plan for just $6.99 per month, which is a whopping 63% discount. But wait, there is more. You can also use my code, which is code with Ari, to get 10% discount on top of the discount that Hostinger offers. Don't miss out on this amazing offer and take your website to the next level with Hostinger's powerful VPS hosting. What's up developers, it's Dari here, and welcome back to a new video series on my channel where we're going to have a look at probably the most requested video series on my channel, which is Laravel Livewire. Now, Livewire is a powerful full-stack framework that allows developers to build dynamic web interfaces. It is built using Laravel and Alpine.js. For me, as a backend developer, using Livewire is a huge plus, because I don't need to write a lot of logic as you do need to do with frameworks such as React or Vue. One of the key advantages of using Livewire is its ability to handle server-side rendering, which means that the UI components are rendered on the server and sent to the client as HTML. This not only improves performance, but also enhances security by reducing the risk of client-side vulnerabilities. Now, most of you probably know that Livewire integrates seamlessly with Laravel. If you think that Vue and React integrate easily, you probably haven't used Livewire before. Livewire leverages its robust features such as routing, authentication, and database management. This makes it a perfect choice for Laravel developers who want to build dynamic web interfaces. Now, I did mention Alpine.js a moment ago, so let's talk about that for a moment. Alpine.js is a JavaScript framework that works alongside Laravel Livewire. It provides interactivity to Livewire components without the need of writing separate JavaScript code. It is lightweight and it's very easy to use. One of the key reasons why Alpine.js is powerful is its simplicity. It allows developers to add dynamic behavior to their UI components using only HTML attributes, which is also the power of Livewire. This means that you can add features like conditional rendering, data binding, and event handling directly in your HTML markup. One personal advantage I think that Alpine.js has is the fact that it has a small file size, making it fast to load and perform. It focuses on providing the essential features needed for interactivity without adding unnecessary complexity. Now, most of the stuff that I will be doing will come from the documentation on Livewire's incredible website. But before we can start the installation process, we need to install a Laravel project because Livewire is installed inside a default Laravel project. So let's navigate to the CLI for a moment, and let's create a new Laravel project through Composer. So let's say Composer, create -project, --prefer-dist, Laravel-Laravel, and let's name it Hostinger Livewire. Once we hit enter, give it a moment, because our project is currently being installed. Alright, now let's change directories into our project by saying cd into Hostinger Livewire. Now before we perform any other command, I want to quickly open my project inside PHPStorm. So pause the video and I'll see you back once you have done that as well. Now the reason why I wanted to open my project inside PHPStorm already is because I want to show you something inside the composer.json file. Once we open it and try to search for Livewire, you won't find anything. This means that we need to install Livewire as a composer dependency package. So let's navigate back to the CLI for a moment, and let's perform a clear right here. We're going to perform the composer require command. It's a package created by Livewire, where the package name is Livewire as well. Once we hit enter, you'll see that it's pulling in the composer package. Alright. Let's navigate back to PHPStorm for a moment. And well, I can already see that Livewire has been added right here, where the version is compatible with version 3.0 or anything higher, which is basically being set by the caret right here, which indicates that minor and patch versions can be updated automatically when running the composer update command inside your project. But major version updates will not be automatically installed to prevent breaking changes. Now the magic of Livewire needs to happen inside the resources directory. Well, basically the view part of it. And what I want to do right here is basically open the views directory and create a new application structure. So in my views directory, I want to create a new subdirectory named layouts. And in my layouts directory, I want to create 3 files. The first one will be app.blade.php. That was a typo. Give me a moment. All right. The second file will be nav.blade.php, while the last file will be named footer.blade.php. Now I have created a GitHub repository. Let's open it for a moment, where you will find the templates inside the resource directory, views directory, layout, where you will find app, footer, and nav. So what I want to do is to basically copy them real quick. So this is my app page. Inside my app.blade, navigate back, open the footer, copy it, paste it in here, and we have the nav. So let's copy this one as well and paste it inside the nav page. All right, now let's close off the files. And I have added my GitHub repository in the description down below. Now, when you add Livewire through Composer, you don't need to add any additional configuration. Everything is already set up for you to start using Livewire in your project. Pretty cool, isn't it? We're not going to create a working application. Well, we're going to create one without errors, obviously, but I simply want to show you the important features of Livewire, so I'm not going to create an application from scratch. So what I want to do right now is basically set up something very simple. So let's navigate to the CLI for a moment, and let's perform a clear right here. And I want to create a new migration and model. And once again, I'm not going to follow best practices by creating separate tables for certain columns. I simply want to create a table and model which I can use to interact with the database. So let's create a new model and migration. Let's say PHP artisan make column model. Let's name it task, and let's add a -m flag to it. Once we hit enter, you'll see that our model and migration have been created. Let's navigate back to PHP Storm. Let's open the databases directory, migrations, and let's open the tasks table. And right in between my ID and timestamps, I'm simply going to create a new table through the table object. It's going to be a string where the name will simply be name. Now let's navigate back to iTerm one more time, because I want to create 2 seeders to have some dummy data. So let's say PHP artisan make colon seeder. Let's name it user seeder. And let's also run the PHP artisan make colon seeder named task seeder. I just personally prefer seeders over factories. Don't ask me why. It's probably something I just got used to very quick when I started using Laravel. Now the last thing that I want to do right here is run the valet link command, so I can open my project inside the browser. Now let's define our seeders real quick. Let's navigate back to PHP Storm. Let's close off our tasks table, seeders directory, and let's start inside our user seeder. Right here, I'm going to make a call to the user model, the create method. I'm going to pass in an array. Simple stuff right here, where the name is equal to code with Dari. The email is info@codewithdari.com. And my password will actually come from the where is it? The user factory, where you will find the hashed password. So let's copy it, paste it inside my password value, which will basically have the value of password. Now let's close off the user seeder and open the task seeder. And what I want to do right here is first defining an array named tasks, set it equal to an array, pass in an array inside of it, where the user ID column will be 1. And give me a moment, I actually forgot the user ID column. So let's say table foreign ID. The foreign ID will be user underscore ID. It is constrained on the table users, and it is cascade on delete. Now inside my task seeder, I'm going to pass in a name of simple task 1. And then right after my array inside my tasks array, I'm going to pass in another array where the user underscore ID will also be 1. And the name will be task 2. Now right below our array of tasks, we need to loop over our task array because we have multiple tasks and insert them into the database. So let's say for each, because we're going to loop over our tasks as one single task. Then right here, we're going to use our task model. And we're going to use the insert method, where we're going to insert our task itself. Since we haven't defined our guarded or fillable property inside our model, we can't really run this. So let's open our app directory, models and task model. And for this example, I'm simply going to use the fillable property, where I'm going to set the user underscore ID, but also the name. Now let's quickly register our seeders inside our database seeder. Let's get rid of the comments that we have. Right here, we're going to use the this call method, pass in an array of seeders, where the first seeder must be our user seeder, where the second seeder will be the task seeder. Now we're almost done with this part, since we do need to set up our database credentials, create a new database, and migrate our tables. So let's close off the 3 files that we have open the .env file, scroll down because my database will be named Hostinger Livewire. My username is root and my password is Dari1234. Let's navigate back to iTerm, perform a clear. Let's say PHP artisan migrate. All right, artisan is asking us whether we want to create our database. So let's say yes. So it has created our database and it has run the migrations. And finally, we need to run the PHP artisan db:/seed command, where you will see that our 2 seeders have been seeded. Now there's one more thing left, and I'm not really sure whether I want to use it within the course, but I'm still going to define it. Let's navigate back to PHP Storm, and let's open our task model, and let's quickly define a simple relationship. Let's say public function user. We're going to return this belongs to, and it belongs to the user model class. Let's type hint it to a belongs to, and I think we're set right now. Before we wrap up this video, I want to show you that Livewire allows you to publish configuration files. And if you have used Laravel before, which I actually expect you have, you most likely know that you can publish any configuration file or package and so on. This needs to be done through the CLI. So let's navigate back to iTerm. Let's perform a clear. And let's say PHP artisan livewire : publish. And the Livewire command is something we have pulled in through Composer, which is a new set of artisan commands that we can use. Now let's add a -- config flag to it. Now, as the command implies, this will publish the configuration file of Livewire to your Laravel project. So if we navigate back to PHP Storm, let's open our config directory, where right here you will find a Livewire configuration file. Now in this file, you can customize the configuration settings of Livewire according to your needs. Now once you create a component, Laravel will store the component inside the app directory, where it will create a Livewire directory for you. This also will be the namespace, which you can change right here. Now next to creating a Livewire component class, Artisan will also create a view for you. And right here, you will see that the view is stored inside the components directory, layouts directory, and app directory. Now I'm not going to cover all these configurations, but I hope you understand the point of how you can make configuration changes right here. In the last episode, I mentioned components a couple times. If you are a pure backend developer and have never worked with any other JavaScript framework, I got some explaining to do. Components in Livewire are essentially reusable UI elements that encapsulate logic and presentation. They allow you to break down your user interface into smaller, self-contained units, making your code more organized and maintainable. One of the main reasons why we use components is to enhance the interactivity and responsiveness of our web application. By encapsulating both from the server-side logic and the front-end markup, Livewire components provide a seamless and efficient development experience. React and Vue, or pretty much any other front-end framework, uses the term components. The main difference between components in Livewire and components in React or Vue is the underlying technology. Livewire is a server-side framework, which means that the components are rendered on the server and sent to the client as HTML, while React and Vue are client-side frameworks, where the components are rendered on the client's browser using JavaScript. While React and Vue components provide a more dynamic and interactive user experience, Livewire components offer the advantage of easy integration with Laravel server-side functionality. Now, components needs to be created through the CLI. So let's navigate to it for a moment. And let's actually run the PHP artisan command before we create a component. And if we scroll up a little bit to the section where all the Livewire commands are, right here, you will see that there is one command named a Livewire make, which is to create a new Livewire component. So let's perform it. Let's say PHP artisan a Livewire make, and then you need to define the name of your Livewire component. Now, Livewire recommends two naming conventions. The first naming convention for Livewire components is to use Pascal case, where each word is capitalized and there are no spaces or special characters. So if you want to create a Livewire component for a task create, you can name it task create. The second naming convention is to use kebab case, where you name it with dashes. So let's say task-create. Now, since pretty much all classes and files in Laravel are built using Pascal case, I recommend using Pascal case for your Livewire components as well. So let's say that our component will be named task create. Now, once we hit enter, you'll see that Artisan has prompted us with a message saying that two files have been created for us right here. Now, like we have briefly discussed in the first chapter, it has created a component class for us inside the app/Livewire namespace named task create. And it has also created a view inside the resource directory, views directory, a new directory named Livewire, where it has created a blade template named task-create. So let's start inside our component class. Let's navigate back to PHP Storm, where you will find our Livewire directory inside our app directory with our task create file. Right here, you will see that our class is extending the component class. And the component class in Livewire is used as the base class for creating Livewire components. It provides various methods and properties that allow you to define the behavior and presentation of your Livewire component. We will cover these along the way. There's no need to open the component class and cover them individually. By extending the component class, you can add custom logic as well, handle user interaction, and render the component's view. By default, Livewire provides one method out of the box inside the components class, and that's the render method. The render method in Livewire is a built-in method provided by the component class. As the name implies, it is responsible for rendering the Livewire component view, which it has already set for you because it's the Livewire subdirectory inside the views directory, where it has created a task-create.blade.php file. Now let's open our view actually. Rest scroll down, Livewire directory, task-create.blade.php. Right here, you will see that it has added a simple div with a comment inside of it. Nothing special. Now if we replace our comment right here with, let's say, a string of task create, navigate to the browser, change your endpoint to task-create, you will see that we got prompted with a 404, meaning that the page does not exist. And that is right, because Livewire does not magically register the route. Before we register the route, I quickly want to make a small adjustment to our project. Right now, we got a simple project with just one model, right? The task, which works with the task functionalities. What I recommend doing is adding the components class as well as the view in a subdirectory named task. We don't need to do this manually because Artisan can help us a bit. So let's navigate to PHP Storm for a moment. Let's delete the Livewire directory. And let's also delete the task create component class. Let's navigate back to iTerm, perform a clear, hit the arrow up to create our task create component. But this time, I'm going right in front of the class name, add the keyword of tasks and the dot notation, which will tell Artisan that a subdirectory named tasks need to be created. If we hit enter, you'll see that right inside of the output, it has created a task subdirectory for the component class and also for the view. Now let's talk about routing. Let's think about it for a moment. We have created a view named task-create. This isn't a small component that you will use on multiple places on different pages. What we have created right here, and well, the view as well, let's scroll down. right here, is called a full page component. These can be used to build standalone pages with logic and views, and these need to be registered inside the routes directory web.php file. Now let me get rid of the comments right here. Later on, we will create a component which will be a pop-up message whenever a task has been created. These components do not need to be registered as a route because it isn't a full page component. It's simply a component which will be called once an action has been performed. So inside our web.php file, we need to register a route, pretty much in the same way as you register a route from a Laravel controller. But instead of importing the controller class, we're simply going to import the Livewire component class. So let's say route : get. The endpoint will be tasks create. Then we're going to add a second parameter, which is the task create Livewire component class and the class itself. And let's replace it with an import. All right, this looks a little bit cleaner. Now let's navigate to the browser. Let's change our endpoint to tasks/create. And right here, you will see that we have been prompted with another error message. Well, this one was actually on purpose. It's telling us that the layout view has not been found inside the components, layouts, and app directory, where a app.blade.php file needs to be shown. Now, what is going wrong right here? Well, full page components will use a default application layout. And by default, let's navigate back to PHP Storm, open our Livewire configuration file. And where is it? So let me scroll up a little bit. Right here in the layout, you will see that it has been set to components, layouts, app. But in our application, let's scroll down a little bit. We haven't stored it inside a components directory. So we could remove that from our route. So let's remove components and just use layouts.app. Navigate back to Google Chrome and refresh it, where you will see that the error is gone, but the task create string is not visible yet. So let's fix that. Let's navigate back to PHP Storm and open the app.blade.php file. And right here, you will see that we're yielding content, but this only works in Blade and not in Livewire. In Livewire, you need to ensure that you have created a Blade file at this location and include a slot placeholder. Slot is a special variable that is used to define the content that should be rendered inside a component's layout. It acts as a placeholder for dynamic content that can be customized for each specific instance of the component. If we navigate back to the browser for a moment and refresh it, you'll see that it is still not printed out, and that's because we haven't created the text here. So let's say task create, navigate back and refresh it. You will see that task create has been printed out. Now there's still a small issue right here with the slot variable, because the slot variable right here only works with Livewire. And since we're trying to access our layout for both Blade and Livewire, we need to perform a check to only show the slot when the slot is defined. So the way we could do that is basically getting rid of it, adding the @isSet directive, where we're going to check if slot has been set. If slot has been set, we're simply going to print out slot, and we're going to close it off with an @isSet. If we navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, you'll see that task create has still been printed out, and that's because our slot has been defined. Now, this looks awesome, and I hope that it's starting to click. Now let me show you a little bit more component configuration. Now let's open our Livewire configuration file, and let's add components right in front of the layout again for a moment, which should throw an error inside the browser. All right, but the issue with this, now the issue right here is that layout will change it for all of your views. And maybe you don't need that, and you simply need to add the app.blade.php layout for one specific view. Livewire allows you to register different layouts for every single component. Let's open our component for a moment. So our task create component, all right. And right above the render method, we can add the hashtag brackets and add layout inside our brackets. And don't forget to import Livewire attributes, which is called whenever you want to load a custom layout. So inside the layout method, you simply need to pass in a string where you can add the relative path view to your custom layout. So let's say layouts.app. Now let's navigate to the browser for a moment, refresh it, and you'll see that our custom layout is visible again. Now let's actually navigate back to iTerm for a moment and create a second component. So let's say PHP artisan Livewire make tasks.taskIndex. All right, navigate back to PHP Storm. Let's first register the route right above the create route. So route : get. It is for tasks. We're going to use the task index class component. Let me actually replace it with a qualified import. All right. Scroll down and open our task index. Replace our comment with task index. Navigate to the browser. Change our endpoint to just tasks. And you will see that we have been prompted with an error because the view that we're trying to render does not exist. And this is happening because inside our task create component, where is it again? Well, let me scroll up. We specifically said that this class should only use a different layout. Now there's even another method of changing the layout, and that's using the fluent syntax. Let's get rid of our attribute right here, and right after the view method, you can change the layout method. And right here, you can pass in the same layout. So let's say layouts.app. If we navigate to the browser, refresh our task create endpoint, you will see that this page is visible again. For now, I want to remove the layout method that we have changed right here. And I want to change the layout inside my Livewire configuration file where I want to remove the components. Now, since we're using the layout of the app.blade.php file, let's open it for a moment again. Right here, scroll up. You'll see that right here, we have set the title of the page to Hostinger Livewire. Now, this static piece of text right here works on localhost, but do you actually want to show this on all the pages that you have? Technically, no, because the title says a lot to your page visitors. Livewire allows you to assign unique page titles to each page in your application, using the same two methods as I have showed you as setting the layout of your component. Let's start inside our task index first, right here. Quick note, we just added it right above the render method, but you can also add it right above the class declaration, right here. One method is not faster than the other, so just choose a method that you prefer. So let's say hashtag brackets title, and the title will be tasks Hostinger Livewire. Now behind the scenes, Livewire will create a new variable named title that you can use inside the layout that you have defined. So let's define it inside our layout first. So let's get rid of Hostinger Livewire, add curly braces, and we're going to print out the title. But if the title has not been set, we're still going to print out Hostinger Livewire. If we navigate back to the browser and refresh our tasks endpoint, that went wrong. You'll see that the title has been changed to task-Hostinger Livewire. The second option is the one that I want to show you on my task create, is simply chaining the title method to the view method, where the title will be set to create task Hostinger Livewire. If we navigate to the browser, change our endpoint to task/create, you will see that a title has been created named create task-Hostinger Livewire. Now, I want to stick to one method, so let's navigate back to PHP Storm, and I personally prefer chaining the title method. So let's open the task index, get rid of our title attribute. Now let's chain the title method to the view method of tasks Hostinger Livewire. Properties in Livewire are essentially variables that are defined within a Livewire component. Properties are very essential in Livewire as they allow us to store and manage data specific to each component. They allow you to create dynamic and interactive components by binding properties to input fields or other elements in the component's view. With properties, we can easily capture user input, display data from the backend, and manage data within Livewire components. They play a crucial role in building powerful and interactive web applications using Livewire. When you want to define properties, you basically define them in the same exact way as you define properties in PHP, right below the class definition. So since we're already in the task index, let's define one right here. Right below the class definition, you use the keyword public, protected, or private, but when it comes to properties in Livewire, they always need to be public because they need to be accessible outside of the class, followed with a name. Let's start with the name of $tasks. You do want to assign some kind of value to tasks, and in most cases, you want to make a database request to retrieve data, which you can then assign to a property task. If we once again think about how this is done in Laravel, I would say that you can define a constructor, right? In Livewire, it's named a little bit different, but the idea behind it is exactly the same, since we got to make use of a special method, which allows us to perform initialization logic when a Livewire component is first loaded. It's the same methodology as a constructor, but in Livewire, it's called mount. So let's define a new function named public function mount. Once again, the mount method will be automatically called when the component is rendered. Now, inside the mount method, you can perform tasks such as retrieving data from a database, setting initial property values, or performing any other necessary setup for your component. Now, what do we got to do right here? Well, let's make a database request to retrieve all tasks. So let's say that we want to set the value of this tasks. So we're referring to our public task property equal to the task model, where we're going to use the with method because we're going to add the user relationship to it and chain the get method to it. Quick note, remember that the mount method is only called once when the component is initially rendered. Now here comes a pretty cool feature that Livewire has to offer. In Livewire, you can automatically use variables from the mount method in your views by simply referencing them directly. Livewire handles the binding of these variables to the view for you. So we have to find our property named tasks. If we then open our task index page, replace our task index with curly braces and our variable named tasks, Laravel will automatically pass the task variable to the view, allowing you to access and display the data. So let's navigate back to the browser. Let's change the endpoint to tasks. And right here, well, it's not that clear, but let me select it for a moment. You will see that our task variable has been dumped on the screen. Now, if we navigate to my GitHub repository for a moment, you'll see that I have created the Livewire directory as well and a task index as well. So let's copy the entire div, navigate back to PHP Storm and paste it right here. And I need to get rid of this span right here. All right. Navigate back to the browser, our local host, refresh it, where you will see that we have outputted a simple box which should represent a task. So follow along for a moment, because what we're going to do right here is a bit of Laravel magic, not really related to Livewire. So inside our views directory, I would like to create a new directory named components. And I'm not going to cover everything regarding to components. I have a complete tutorial available for that, which I will link in the description down below. And inside of my components directory, I'm going to create a task-item.blade.php file. And I'm actually going to paste the entire task index right here. Once again, get rid of my span. All right. Then inside my task index, I actually want to get rid of everything that I just copied. Create a for each directive where we're going to loop over our tasks as one single task. And inside my loop, I want to call my task item component that I have just created by saying x-task-item, and we need to close it off. If we navigate back to the browser and refresh it, you will see that we have received an error message, which you will see quite a lot. So I got some explaining to do. The error message, Livewire only supports one HTML element per component, means that inside the task index, Laravel found multiple root HTML elements. Livewire components can only have a single root element, meaning that all HTML content within the component must be wrapped within a single parent element. Now let's solve this issue. First, let's pass in a variable to our component by saying task is equal to our $task variable. What we then need to do is copy everything in this file for a moment, create an empty div, and paste what we just copied inside of it. Then inside our actual component, which is the task item, we need to add something new, which is right after the class, and that is called wire::key, which needs to be set equal to a string. Now follow along for a moment, and then I'll have some explaining to do. We're going to pass in curly braces right here, and we're going to pass in the task ID. Now in Laravel Livewire, the wire::key is called an attribute, is first off required, and it is used to track and manage the state of dynamic rendered components of elements within a Laravel component. It helps Livewire to identify and update specific elements when the component is re-rendered. The wire::key attribute assigns a unique identifier to each rendered element of our component. In our code snippet, the ID is used to assign a unique identifier to each task item component based on the ID of the task. If we navigate to the browser, refresh it, you'll see that our error is gone, and since we have added 2 rows inside our seeder, you'll see that 2 rows have been printed out. I need to add a little bit of margin right here. So let's say margin bottom is 4. I think that should be alright. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Now let's change the dynamic data for a moment, just like it's Laravel. So let's say right here, we want to print out the task name, and well, that was actually it. If we refresh it, you'll see that task 1 and task 2 have been printed out. Now we set that the mount method that we have defined inside our, let me actually close off a couple tabs right here. It's getting quite messy. Inside our task index, right here, is a special method that allows us to perform initialization logic when a Livewire component is first loaded. But sometimes you simply want to pass in additional data to your view without actually defining a property for it. And it's pretty simple to do so, since you have used the same method in Laravel controllers. Let's go right below our render method, the title actually, where we need to chain the width method to it. We're going to pass in an array right here because you can pass in multiple variables. But for now, let's say that we want to create the text for our button, which will be new task. Now let's navigate back to our task index page. And let's say that we want to add a new button right above our loop. So let's say div. It has a class of text center and the padding bottom is 10. We're going to create a button inside of it with the text of our variable button. Once again, coming from the width method. And we're going to add a couple classes to our button. Let's say rounded MD. The BG is pink 600. Padding X is 4. Padding Y is 3. Text is small. The font is semi-bold. The text is white. Shadow is MD, and when it's hovering, the background will be pink 500. Finally, don't forget to add the type of submit to it. Now, if we navigate to the browser and refresh it, you'll see that we have added a new button right here named new task. Now, let's quickly upgrade our code a little bit by creating a new component inside our components directory, where we're going to name it button.blade.php. We're going to copy the button that we have created, paste it inside of it, and then inside our task index, we're going to make a call to our X button. We're going to pass in one variable, which will be button, which is equal to our variable button. If we navigate back to the browser, refresh it, you'll see that we have not been prompted with an error message. Now let's move on to the next topic, which is data binding. Data binding in Laravel allows you to establish a connection between the data in your Livewire component and a user interface element in your view. It basically enables you to easily capture user input and update the component data without manually handling the input events. Now in Laravel, you can basically see this as something like the request object class, where you perform a request and you can use the data in your controller. The idea behind it is the same, but data binding is what I just explained times 10. Let's navigate back to PHP Storm, and right above our button, we're gonna create a new input field. The type should be equal to text. We're gonna add a class to it, which is rounded MD. The width is 1-5, the border is 0, py is 2, text gray 900. For the placeholder, the text will be text gray 400 on small sm colon text sm colon leading 6. Then once again, follow along because we're going to add a new wire directive, which will be wire colon model, which is used for data binding. It establishes a connection between a user interface element, which is our user input field right here, and a property in a Livewire component, which we will define. But first, we need to set a value to it, which will be name. So let's open our task index for a moment, and right below our public tasks property, we're going to create a public name property. So right now, whenever we define anything inside our input field, it will be also linked to our name property right here. Well, not exactly, but we got one more step missing because we somehow need to submit the input field to the browser, which makes sense, right? So let's open our button component and let me align this on the line below. And right below our type submit, we're going to add another wire directive, which will be wire colon click, which we're going to set equal to a string. The wire click directive in Livewire is used to bind a JavaScript click event to a Livewire component method. It allows you to define a component method that will be executed when the associated element is clicked by the user. So whenever a user adds a new task, clicks on the button, we need to redirect it to our component, which is usually to a function. So let's say add right here. So the same flow as before. Let's open our component class. Then right below our mount method, we're going to define a public function add. And what I want to do right here is simply add a DD of our property of name. If we navigate to the browser, refresh it, you'll see that we have added an input field. So let's add a task tree. Click on our button to trigger the wire click functionality, where you will see that our die dump has been outputted. All right, this is step number 1 of showing Livewire its power. We're going to advance step by step. So what will be the next logic? Well, you would say that we should do something with the name that we have sent to our Livewire component. And to be specific, probably persist the data into the database. Well, you are right, but that's something we will do in the next episode, where we will work on actions. For now, I want to move on to route parameters, which is also something pretty useful when it comes to components. Since what we have done right now was not working with a full page component. And that's something we will continue on doing. Later on, I want to have this screen right here, where we could add new tasks. But let's say that you want to show a detailed page of a task. Then you need to start working with route parameters. So let's navigate to the CLI for a moment. And let's create a new Livewire component for a full page component, which will show one specific task. So let's say PHP artisan Livewire colon make tasks / task show. If we then navigate back to PHP Storm, open our web.php file, and right below our create route, we're going to create a new route, which will be to tasks / a route parameter of ID from our task show component. And we're once again going to import the. Now each ID right here will represent a unique task. So let's open our task component for a moment. So task show. We're going to define a new property. So let's say public task, but we're going to type into it to specify that the task property right here should be an instance of the task model. Then we're going to define a public function mount method inside of it. which accepts an ID, which is coming as a route parameter as we have set inside our route. And then we're going to set our property of task equal to our task model, use the find or fail method, and it should look based on the ID. So let's scroll down a little bit because we need to open our task show. Let's once again get rid of the comment. And what I actually want to do is basically say, well, H1, give it a class of font bold, tracking is tight, the text is white, SM will be text 6XL, and the text needs to be centered. And we're simply going to print out the task name. And once again, the task is coming from our property that we have defined. So let's navigate to the browser. Let's change our endpoint to, let's say, /1, where you will see that task 1 has been printed out. If we change it to task 2, you'll see that task 2 has been printed out. Now, one more thing, and I'm a huge fan of route model binding in Laravel, and that works in Livewire too. So let me quickly show you how that works, starting inside our web.php file. Instead of passing in the ID, we're going to pass in the actual task, where we need to make a small change inside our mount method, because instead of accepting an ID, we're going to type hint our task to a task object, where we're not going to set our property equal to our model anymore, because that will be done behind the scenes. So we're simply going to set it equal to our task coming in. If we then navigate to the browser and refresh our endpoint, you will see that the output is still visible, but we have used route model binding over a simple route parameter. Now let's see a little bit more Livewire magic. In Livewire, the wire object refers to the instance of a Livewire component itself. It provides access to various properties and methods that can be used within a component. In any Livewire component view, a magic wire object will be exposed to Alpine.js, which you can access inside your component. So let's say that if a user, well, let me change the endpoint to tasks. All right. So let's say that if a user adds a name inside our input field, right? And we want to show the number of characters inside of it. Just imagine how long that would take in a framework like Vue or React. Now let me show you how long it takes in Livewire. Start your counter and let me know in the comments down below how long it took. Let's navigate back to PHP Storm, open our task index right here, and let's define a span right after our input field. Let's give it a class of absolute-ml-6 and the margin top is 2. We're going to define a span inside of it, where we're going to add a x-text, which will be the wire object we just talked about. So $wire.name.length. If we then navigate to the browser and refresh it, let's type in a task name. So let's say task 5, where you will see that the wire object is counting the length of the name and it's outputting it directly, which is pretty cool. What I want to do right now is creating a new task through the input field that we have and the button that we got right next to it. So let's navigate to PHP Storm for a moment. Now let's open our task index. And what I want to do right here is replacing add with save, which says a little bit more than add. And naming methods to their action is very important. Now, quick note, we could create a completely different view for the task create page, but I think that is not really necessary in this case, since we simply got one input field. But if we had more, I would recommend using a full page component for it. Now we have linked through our input field right here using wire model, the name property to our, where is it? Name property right here, excuse me. Then for our button, we have said that it should trigger the add method when someone clicks on it, but instead of add, we're going to say save. Now this is static, and this means that whenever we use our button component, all Livewire components should have a save method defined. So let's get rid of it, and let's pass in a variable named click, and then inside our task index, we could pass in a second variable, which will be :click, which will be a string of save, which will trigger the wire click right here. Now let's test it out real quick. Let's navigate to Google Chrome. Let's say task 3. Click on new task. Task 3 has been triggered inside the save method. Now let's define the save method inside our component. Let's navigate to our task index, get rid of our DD. And first right here, we're going to use our task model. And then we're going to access the static method named create. Now we only need to retrieve the value of the name. So we could pass it in as a string. But since we have the user ID as well, which we actually have to add static, I'm going to pass in an array, say that the user ID should be 1, and the name should be coming from our property named this name. Then I'm also going to add a simple redirect by saying return this redirect to the route method. Well, we actually haven't defined the named route. We're going to name it tasks. Then inside our web.php file, on the first route, we're going to chain the name method to it, and the name will be tasks. So let's give it a try. Let's navigate to the browser, refresh it, create a task tree, click on new task, and as you could see, it has redirected us to the tasks endpoint. So it's basically refreshing the page, but in most cases, you want some kind of magic which will add a new row without a refresh. That's something which we will do in the next episode, where we're going to have a look at actions. For now, you'll see that a task has been inserted, but without any validation. So let's have a look at that, since we're kind of getting used to the flow of Livewire. If we navigate back to PHP Storm and open our task index, you don't add validation in Livewire as you do in Laravel controllers, where you basically can say, well, the request object that we have, chain the validate method to it and validate, let's say, the name on a string, or it should be required. In Livewire, you need to go right above the property that you want to validate, and in our case, it will be the name, and you can add an attribute to it. So once again, hashtag brackets, and the attribute name is rule. Let's pull it in. And once you add the rule attribute, the validation will automatically be applied to the property value anytime you update the server side. So let's for now say that the name should be required. We're not done yet, because we do have to tell our save method that it should enable the validation rules that we have added right above our property. So inside our save method, the first thing that we're going to do is say, well, this validate. So it should basically validate everything that comes in first. Now we're not done yet, because we do need to make sure that we output our error message, in case there is one, right below our input field. So what we could do is navigating to our task index, and right below our button component, let me align this for a moment, we could create a new div where we're going to say, well, it has a class of text red 500. We're going to add an error directive in Blade named name. So it should check for the name. If it has, we're going to create a new span. Let me actually align this on the line below of the actual message that is being passed through. And we're going to close off our error directive by saying add and error. If we navigate back to the browser, refresh it, try to create a new task without adding a name, you will see that we have been prompted with an error message without a page refresh. Now, if we open our task index for a moment, you will see that we have passed in a string inside of our rule method, where we can only pass in a one rule. Now, don't worry, because just as working with Laravel forms, you could pass in multiple validation rules by passing in an array. So let's say that it should be required, it should have a maximum of 10 characters, and it should be a string. Or you could use another method, which is completely removing everything that we just added, including the array, pass in a string again, and add pipes to define separate validation rules. So let's say required, pipe max of 10, and it should be a string. So let's navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, try to create a task. You'll see that the name field is required. But let's say that it has more than 10 characters. Click on new task. you'll see that the second error has been prompted, which says that the name field must not be greater than 10 characters. Now, before we move on to the next topic, I want to show you how you could easily show validation errors as the user fills out the form. So let's navigate back to our view for a moment. So our task index. Now let's look for our input field right here. And there are two methods on how you could do this. The first method is adding the .live right after the wire model attribute. What this will do is sending network requests as the user fills out the form. If validation fails, the property won't be updated on the server and a validation message will be shown to the user. If we navigate to the browser, refresh it, click on our input field, add a long name. So let's say again, this is a very long name. You will see that while typing, Livewire has added the validation on the input field without refreshing the page. And if we hit the arrow back until we hit 10 characters, you will see that the error message has been disappeared. Now the second method is replacing the .live with .blur. And .blur in Livewire is an alternative to the .live method for showing validation errors as the user fills out the form. By using .blur on wire column model, Livewire will send network requests and run the appropriate validation rules when the input field loses focus. This allows for real-time validation and immediate feedback to the user if there are any validation errors. Same thing, just slightly different. Now let's move on to the next method, which is showing a loading indicator. Now since we're on localhost and we only submit a couple columns, which is the name, ID, and timestamps, the loading time isn't that much. But Livewire allows you to easily add a loading indicator once you submit a form. By default, Livewire will automatically disable submit buttons and mark inputs as read-only while a form is being submitted. This prevents the user from submitting the form again while the first submission is being handled. However, it can be difficult for users to detect this loading state without extra affordance in your application's UI. So let's navigate to our button component for a moment, because we do need to add it right here. And let's actually navigate to the browser for a moment. And let's search for Flowbyte. I'm simply going to use a component from Flowbyte right here. Let's search for spinner. Let's open the first one, where you will see a spinner right here. So let's copy the entire div. Now we're not going to paste it right here because I'm going to create a new component. So let's say X spinner. Now let's close it off. Let's create a new component. Let's name it spinner.blade.php. Paste it right here. And the only thing I want to change right here is the fill blue to pink. Now let's navigate to our button component because we're not done yet. Let's copy it, create a div, paste it inside of it. Then we need to add a trigger. So right inside of our div, we're gonna say wire :loading. So let's navigate back to Google Chrome, localhost, refresh it. Let's create a new task named task 4 and pay attention to the right side of our button, where you will see that a loading indicator has been shown for a millisecond. Actions in Livewire are an essential feature that allows developers to handle user interactions and perform server-side logic without refreshing the entire page. Now we have already defined a very simple action in the previous episode, where we have said that once a user adds a name, clicks on the new task button, a new task is created through the save action. And technically, that's all you need to know about actions on a very basic level. Now let's see how we could extend our action by adding an alert confirmation for a user when they try to create a new task. So inside our button component, we're going to define a second action, which is right after our wire click, named wire: confirm. Now the wire confirm directive in Laravel is used to display a confirmation alert to the user before performing a certain action. When the user triggers an action that has this wire confirm directive, Livewire will display a confirm dialog with a specified message. Well, a message that we have to define. So let's set it equal to a string of "Are you sure you want to add this task?" A user can then confirm or cancel the action based on their intention. Now behind the scenes, The wire confirm directive is called as an event listener because it allows you to respond to various types of user interaction. And the same actually goes for the wire click directive. Out of the box, Livewire supports a total of 7 different event listeners. So let's actually navigate to the browser and test this out before we cover the other 5. Let's navigate to the browser, let's refresh the page, and let's try to create a new task named Task 5. Click on New, where you will see that we have been prompted with an alert saying, are you sure that you want to add this task with a typo? Let's say OK. And as you can see, it has been added. Let's actually navigate back and get rid of my typo right here. All right. And the third event listener is the wire key down directive. The wire key down directive in Livewire is used to listen for keyboard events on an element. It allows you to define a method on your Livewire component that will be triggered when a specific key is pressed. So let's say that once a user clicks on the enter of their keyboard, the task needs to be saved. So we basically don't need the button. So let's actually quickly delete both click directives that we have. Then inside our task index for our input, we're going to add the wire key down. And I'm actually going to navigate to Google Chrome for a moment, open the documentation and click on Actions, where you actually will, see the key down options that you have available right here. So shift, enter, space, and so on. So let's navigate back to PHP Storm. Let's say .enter, and then it needs to trigger the save method inside our task index right here. So let's navigate back to Google Chrome, localhost, start typing, let's say task 6. And if we then hit enter, you'll see that it has automatically inserted our task. Now the next event listener that I want to show you is the wire key up, which we could also add inside our input field. So instead of saying key down, we're going to say key up, and we're going to keep it as it is because the key up directive is used to listen for the key up event on an element. So it will basically trigger when a key is released on your keyboard. If we leave it as it is right now, it will basically trigger the save method every time we hit a key on our keyboard. So let's give it a try. Let's navigate back to Google Chrome. Let's refresh it, or let's say T, and it has already added a row for us. Now let me actually navigate to PHP Storm, quickly connect to my database. So let's say MySQL, where are you? All right, root, Darby1234, and my database is hosting our Livewire. Apply, okay. I just need to clean it up a little bit because I don't want to scroll every single time we have a new task. All right. Now what we could do next is right after the key up, say, well, whenever it triggers the 0 on my keyboard, it should save our new task. So let's navigate to the browser, refresh it, say task 2. But if we hit 0, you will see that it has triggered it and it has saved our new task. Then we have the wire mouse enter directive. And the wire mouse enter directive is a pretty cool directive because it is literally used to listen for the mouse enter event on an element. Now you might wonder when this will be useful. Think about the use of a directive when you want to create interactive elements that respond to mouse hover events. To use the mouse enter directive, you specify the method that needs to be called in your Laravel component. So let's say that instead of saying wire key up, we're going to say mouse enter. And it's going to trigger, once again, the save method. If we navigate to the browser, refresh it, hover over the input field, and right here, you will see that the save method in the Livewire component has been triggered, where the user mouse pointer enters the boundaries of the input element. Flash messages are temporary messages that are stored in the session and displayed to the user after a specific action or event has been performed. Think about our current example. Once we create a new task, we should prompt the user with some kind of message which will say that the task has been created. They are commonly used to provide feedback or notifications to the user, such as success messages, error messages, or informative messages. Us developers will understand coding-wise when a request was successful or not, but users who use our website probably don't. Now, using flash messages in Livewire is extremely easy. Actually, just as easy as you use them in Laravel itself. We need to store our flash message inside a session. So let's navigate back to PHP Storm. And let's open our Livewire component for a moment, which is the task index. And right after our task creation, we're going to make use of the session method. And the session method is a helper method that allows you to interact with your session data. The session method provides various methods to interact with the session, such as storing values, retrieving values, checking if a value exists, and removing values from a session. What we're going to do right here is chaining the flash helper function to it, which allows you to store a value in a session for a single request. It accepts two parameters. The first parameter is the key or name of the flash message, which in our case will be message. Then the second parameter is the value of the flash message, which in our case will be task successfully created. Alright, we need to show our task some way to the user on the front end. And once again, let's create a new component inside our components directory named alert.blade.php. And right here, let's define a div. Let's add an addIf directive because we're going to check if our session has a message, which is the message that we just defined. If it is, we're going to create a div right here with a class of padding 4, margin bottom is 4, the text is SM, the width is 2-6, MX is auto, the text is green 800, it's rounded LG, the BG is green 50, and that's basically it. Then inside our div, we're going to create a span where the class is font medium. It's going to add a success alert. And then right below of it, it's going to print out the session message. All right. Now let's finally call our component real quick. Let's navigate to our task index. And well, let's actually delete the wire mouse enter. We need to navigate to our button real quick, otherwise we can't submit it. And we don't need the confirm. Well, let's open our task index, and right above our input field, we're going to make a call to our X alert. Close it, navigate back to Google Chrome, refresh it, create a task number 3, click on new task, where you will see that a new alert message has been prompted to us. Events in Laravel Livewire are essentially a way to communicate between components and trigger actions based on user interactions or other events. While Laravel also has its own event system, Livewire events have some differences. In Livewire, events are specific to a Livewire component and are used to handle component-specific actions. When an event is triggered within a Livewire component, it can be listened to and handled within the same component or by other Livewire components. Now let's have a look at how we could fire events. In Livewire version 3, the dispatch method is used to trigger an event from a Livewire component. In previous versions, events were defined through a listener's property. So let's navigate back to PHP Storm for a moment, and let's open our task index, and right inside of the save method, right below my session flash message, I'm going to use this dispatch. When you call the dispatch method, you need to pass in the event name as the first parameter. So let's name it task-updated. When the dispatch method is being triggered, the task-updated event will be triggered as well. And every other component on the page that is listening for this event will be notified. Now what we have done right here is simply dispatching the event. So let's see how we could listen to the event. We first need to create a new component, which will update one or multiple tasks. So let's navigate to the CLI, and let's perform the PHP artisan Livewire colon make a tasks/task update component class. And let's open our task update class that we have just generated, and right above the render method, I'm going to define a public function update timestamp method. And in here, I'm going to make a call to my task model, the static query method, and I'm going to chain the update method to it. And what I want to update is an array. I want to update the updated underscore add column, where I want to set the value equal to now. Then we need to tell our update timestamp method that it needs to listen for an event. This can be done by adding a property right above our method. So let's say hashtag brackets. And inside our brackets, we're going to use the on method. And then we need to make a call to our event that is dispatched, which is task-updated. All right. Now when the task-updated event is dispatched from the update timestamps method, a network request will be triggered and the update timestamp action will be invoked. Now we're not done yet. Let's open our task item for a moment. Then right after our task name, we got to output the timestamps of each event to make sure that we see an updated timestamp. So let's say backslash, a blade directive. Right here, we're going to add carbon /carbon. And we're going to use the static parse method where we're going to parse the task updated_at. And we're going to format it to a d-m-y, hours, minutes. Now, the last thing that we need to do is opening our view. So our task-update. Well, not the last thing. There's one more task left. Let's get rid of what we have defined in here. Let's add a class of text-center. We're going to add a button right here with a, give it a moment, wire :click, which will be equal to update timestamp. We're going to add a type to it of submit and a class as well of whitespace -no wrap. The font is medium. The text is pink 700. Hover text pink 600. And the text inside of our button will be refresh me. Now the final thing that we need to do is opening our web.php file, because we need to define a new route, which is route : get tasks update from the task update component class. And let's replace it. All right. Let's navigate to the browser and let's change the endpoint to update. If we click on refresh me, navigate to our hosting or Livewire, you will see that the timestamp of all of our tasks have been updated to now. Lifecycle hooks on Laravel Livewire are special methods that allow you to perform certain actions at different stages of a Livewire component's lifecycle. These hooks are executed automatically by Livewire, providing you with the ability to interact with the component's lifecycle events. We have already worked with one lifecycle hook, so let's navigate back to PHP Storm for a moment and let's open our task index, because right here you'll see that we have defined the mount method, which once again is called when the component is first instantiated and mounted. In addition to the mount method, Livewire supports 6 other lifecycle hooks. Once you become familiar with them, you will find yourself using them frequently. Now let's cover all of them right inside of our task index, right below the mount method. The second lifecycle hook is called public function hydrate. This hook is called when the component is hydrated with data from the server. The third lifecycle hook that we have is the public function boot method, which is called at the beginning of every request, both initial and subsequent. We have the public function updating, which is called before Livewire updates the component's data properties with user input. Then we have the public function updated, which is called after the component's data properties have been updated. We have the public function rendering, which is called before the, render method is being called. And then we got the public function rendered, which is called after the render method is called. And finally, we have the public function dehydrate method, which is called at the end of every component request. These hooks provide a way to perform actions such as initializing data, making API calls, manipulating data, and way more at specific points in the Livewire component cycle. Now let's scroll up and let's start inside the hydrate method first. Now once again, the hydrate method is a lifecycle hook that is called when the component is hydrated with data from the server. Livewire basically needs to send data back and forth between PHP and JavaScript for it to work with the way it does. As part of the messages that get sent there is information about the component and information about the properties. But for the information to be accessible and usable by JavaScript, it needs to be in the right format. The process of hydration is taking the messages and converting its value back into PHP, creating the Livewire component and creating any of the properties that components has. Now let's actually add a simple DD right here for a moment of OK. Let's navigate back to the browser. Let's refresh the page and try to create a new task. So let's say task 2. Click on new task. And right here, you will see that the die dump has been printed out because the hydrate runs at the beginning of every subsequent request. Now the second method that I want to cover quickly is the boot method. So let me comment out the DD. And the boot method in Livewire is a lifecycle hook that is called at the beginning of every request, both initial and subsequent. It allows you to perform any necessary initialization or setup tasks before the component starts processing their request. Now you probably might wonder what the difference is with the mount method. As helpful as the mount method is, it only runs once per component lifecycle, and you may want to run logic at the beginning of every single request to the server for a given component. So what you could do right here, instead of initializing the task property in the mount method, is basically copying what we got right here, commenting it out, pasting it in the boot method. If we navigate back to the browser and refresh it, you'll see that the tasks are still visible. And this can be especially useful when you need to perform certain tasks before every request, regardless of the specific action being performed. And well, we want to specify the tasks property that we have defined before any action is being performed. Now, the updating method in Laravel Livewire is a lifecycle hook that is called before Livewire updates the component's data properties with user input. This hook allows you to perform any necessary actions of validation before the component's data is updated. Now I currently don't have any updating data, so I will skip this one, but the name of the method basically says what it does. Then we have the updated method, which is a lifecycle hook that is called after the component's data properties have been updated. It allows you to perform any necessary actions or manipulation after the data has been updated. This hook is particularly useful when you need to react to changes in the component's data and perform additional logic based on those changes. Now, once again, I'm going to skip this one as well, and I'm going to continue on with the rendering methods. Like I've mentioned before, this is called before the rendered method is called. It allows you to perform any necessary action or manipulation before the component is rendered. The view method has two arguments that we can define. The first is view, while the second one is named data. Both represent data that have been added inside the render method. The view argument is the actual view that's going to be rendered, while the data is the data that is being passed through the view. So let's quickly add a DD right here of view. If we navigate back to Google Chrome and refresh it, and right here, you will see that task index.blade.php has been rendered. If we open the data, you will see that we're passing in a button, our tasks property, our name property, and the layout configuration. If we navigate back to PHP Store, output the data, you'll see that the properties that we have defined are all printed out. So what the rendering method basically allows you to do is modifying the data, since the rendering method is being called before the view is rendered. So let's actually modify the name property, because right now it has been set equal to null. So what we could do is basically say, well, data brackets name is equal to Dari. Now let's then dd the data. If we then refresh the browser, you will see that name have been set. Now let's move on to the next method, which is the rendered method, which is a lifecycle hook that is called after the render method has been called and the component has been rendered. In the rendered method, you can access the rendered view and the data passed to the view. So we need to pass in, once again, two arguments, but the first one is view, while the second one is HTML. Now I'm not going to output the view because it's the same view variable as in the rendering method, but if we dd, let's say HTML, refresh it, you'll see that the entire HTML of the page has been printed out, which is pretty cool. And finally, we have the dehydrate method, which is called at the end of every component's request. It allows you to perform any necessary cleanup or finalization task before the component is finished processing the request. Now, after a request has been performed, I want to convert my collection to an array. So what we could do right here is basically say, well, this tasks is equal to this tasks, but we're going to add the toArray method to it. If we then output this tasks, refresh it, you will see that the output is an array right now. Now, what is a VPS hosting? A VPS stands for Virtual Private Server, which is a web hosting type that uses virtualization technology to create several virtual servers on a single physical server. Each virtual server works independently with its own operating system, CPU, and RAM, allowing users to have more control and customization over the server environment compared to shared hosting. Now, you might wonder what advantages hosting a Laravel application on a VPS hosting has, since there are so many different hosting options. Firstly, it includes great control and customization over server environments, as each virtual server works independently with its own operating system, CPU, and RAM. This allows for more efficient resource utilization and better performance compared to shared hosting. VPS hosting also provides increased security and flexibility, with the ability to scale resources up or down as needed. Now, as you might have noticed throughout this entire course, we're going to use Hostinger as our hosting provider. Hostinger is a web hosting provider, but it even adds more to that. You could set up a shared hosting, cloud hosting, VPS hosting, email hosting, and SSL certificates. But those aren't specifically the reasons why you should choose Hostinger, since there are tons of other web hosting providers available on the web. One of the biggest advantages that VPS hosting on Hostinger offers is there, well, let's open it for a moment. Scroll down to the bottom, right here, is their storage and processors. With the cutting edge technology, you can experience rock solid performance for your web projects. And the best part, it's available on industry leading HPE and Dell servers, spread across 4 continents. You'll have full ownership of your hardware resources thanks to the industry standard KVM virtualization platform. So if you've got an exciting project idea, Hostinger has the technology to make it happen. Secondly, Hostinger offers lightning fast speed and reliable uptime. With their fiber-connected infrastructure, Hostinger offers a blazing fast 300 MB per second network speed. This makes VPS hosting a pretty solid choice when it comes to building e-commerces, gaming platforms, streaming platforms, or pretty much anyone who needs lightning fast website loading speeds. Finally, backups and snapshots. At Hostinger, your data is safe with their automated weekly backups. This means that you can rest assured that your data is protected in case of any unexpected errors or issue. But what if you need to perform major changes to your system? This is where manual snapshots come in. With Hostinger, you can easily create a manual snapshot of your system at any time. This gives you the ability to revert to a previous version of your system within minutes in case anything goes wrong. Overall, having backups and snapshots is crucial when it comes to VPS hosting. With Hostinger's reliable and easy to use backup and snapshot features, you can ensure that your data is always safe and secure. Now, at the moment, you will see that I'm located on the official website of Hostinger on their VPS hosting packages. As you can see, because of Black Friday, Hostinger is offering a 63% discount. So let's scroll down and cover the different packages that they have available. Now, looking at the prices, I got to say that the prices are pretty affordable when it comes to hosting. If you host a Laravel project on cloud hosting, you'll most likely pay a little bit less or maybe even the same, depending on where you're going to host your project. If we take a look at the features that they have to offer, you will see that the bottom 5 right here are on all packages. It offers AI Assistant, it obviously offers full root access, it offers a dedicated IP address, which basically means that an IP address is assigned to a single virtual private server, instead of being shared among multiple servers. This has tons of advantages because it allows for greater control and customization over the server environment, as well as increased security and flexibility. And it finally offers a weekly backup. Dependent on the price, you will receive more bandwidth, and bandwidth refers to the amount of data that can be transferred between your website and your visitors within a certain amount of time, typically measured in gigabytes per month. This completely depends on whatever you need for your application. A website with low traffic and small files may be fine with just 1 GB of bandwidth, But a website with higher traffic or larger files may require significantly more bandwidth to function properly. Secondly, it offers a different NVMe disk space. NVMe SSD storage is a type of high-performance storage technology that uses non-volatile memory access. They also offer a variable of RAM, and RAM stands for random access memory, which is a type of computer memory that allows data to be read and written quickly. It is a crucial component for running applications and programming on a computer. Now finally, they also offer different vCPU cores. vCPU stands for Virtual Central Processing Unit. It's the number of processing cores that are available to your virtual server. The amount of vCPU cores that you will need will depend on the specific requirements of your project, such as the amount of traffic that you expect as the complexity of your application that you will be running. A good starting point is to choose a hosting package that offers at least 2 vCPU cores, and then scale up whenever that's needed. Which kind of brings us to Udemy. The Livewire project we created can easily be hosted on a KVM package, but personally, I would choose using 2 vPCU cores by default. So for now, let's choose the most popular package, which is KVM2. Let's add it to our cart. Now right here, you can see that we could either choose to pay for 12 months, for a single month, which will increase the price significantly, and for 24 months. Now quick note, Hostinger offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, which allows you to test it out and see whether any type of hosting suits your requirements. For now, I'm going to choose the 12-month deal, which will save me $144. And if we scroll down, you will see that for the second step, we need to create a new account. Now, once you have created your account, you can continue on to step number 3, where you could choose the payment method. You'll find an overview of the services that you're going to purchase. So a KVM2 12-month plan for $83, but with taxes and everything, it will turn out to be $101.49. But right under total, you will see that you can add a coupon code. So let's click on it and let's add the coupon code of Code with Dari. And once we click on apply, you'll see that we have received a $10 discount, and the price for a VPS hosting for 1 year comes down to $91. And trust me, that's a great deal to have. For now, add your payment credentials right here, and I'll see you back once you have created your account. Alright, after purchasing my VPS hosting, I've been redirected to this page where I can start the setup. So let's click on Start Now. And right here, you will see that it's prompting us with a question asking us to select the location for our VPS hosting. The location of a VPS hosting server can and will have impact on website loading speeds and overall performance. This is because the physical distance between the server and the user can affect the amount of time it takes for data to travel back and forth. So you basically have to select a location closer to your target audience, so it will ensure faster loading time and better user experience. Since I'm currently located in the Netherlands, I'm going to choose the Netherlands right here. Now let's click on continue. Alright, and for the next step, it's asking us to choose an operating system. There are 3 options right here, and one of them is an option that we're not going to use, which is the one to the right because it's for WordPress. So we're left with the OS with control panel and a plain operating system. Now come on, we're developers. I completely understand that you want an OS with control panel, but I personally prefer to use a plain OS, so I can use a VPS manager that I want to use to connect later on. So in our case, let's click on plain OS. The next step is for the type of control panel we would like to use. And right here, we need to select the operating system for our VPS hosting. You will see 3 recommended options, but you have a complete list of other options. You have Debian, Rocky, and Ubuntu. Regarding Linux and Ubuntu, they are both operating systems based on the Unix operating system. Linux is an open source operating system that is available in many different distributions. While Ubuntu is a specific distribution of Linux, the choice between Linux and Ubuntu would depend on your specific needs and preferences, as well as the compatibility of the control panel you choose. I personally have always used with Ubuntu, and I don't really have a specific reason for that, so I just want to stick to that as well. So let's click on Ubuntu. Let's click on continue. For the next step, we need to set up our VPS hostname, our root password, and we have the option to add an SSH key. So we can change our VPS hostname. We can do that later on. Let's create a secure root password. And I'm going to leave the SSH key option open right now. So let's click on Save and Continue. It's showing us an overview of what we have selected. The VPS location is in the Netherlands. The operating system is Ubuntu. And the hostname is, well, generated by Hostinger. So let's finish our setup, and this will take a moment or two, so pause the video and I'll see you back once that's done. Alright, as you can see, we're located on our H panel where you will find an overview of the server. On the VPS information tab, you will find your dedicated IP address right here. The status, which is currently running, the VPS uptime, which refers to the amount of time that a VPS has been running without interruption. This is an important metric for assessing the reliability and stability of a server. Currently, it's nothing since we have just installed our VPS. Now, we have covered the current operating system and the location and the node version. Now, let's click on the second tab, which is SSH Access. You will find information on how you can access your application through SSH. And in the final tab, which is Plan Details, you will find some information that we have covered before. Now, one pretty cool feature about VPS is that you can upgrade it on the go right at the bottom. Well, in other words, it's scalable, meaning that you can upgrade your plan without having any trouble. This needs to be done right here, where you can upgrade your VPS. Now, I don't want to cover everything in my VPS, because we need to continue on with the installation part as well, which needs to be done through a server manager. The VPS manager that I recommend is Server Avatar, and I'm not going to cover the setup part because it's pretty straightforward. Just create an account, add your payment credentials, and you have access to Server Avatar. I'm simply going to log into my server right now and continue on. So pause the video and continue on when you're ready. As you could see, I'm currently logged into my Server Avatar account, where I can connect my VPS hosting server. Like I just mentioned, Server Avatar is a VPS manager tool that allows you to manage your virtual private server through a graphical interface. And I think the screen right now should make a lot of sense for most developers. You can connect to a custom server, which we need to do, but you can also choose between all those other hosting providers. Then you need to add your details right here. You need to select the tech stack that you want to use, the database type, and you have the option to install Node. Makes sense, right? The typical setup when you want to deploy a Laravel application, but this time on a VPS server. So let's see how we can connect. By default, the custom option is selected, which is the option that we need. If we click on DigitalOcean, you can see that we can simply link our account to it. But since we're using VPS on Hostinger, we need to set it up manually. So first, we need to add our server name, which is the server name that Hostinger has generated for us. So let's navigate back to our overview. Let's copy the server name. Now let's paste it inside the server name field. Then we need to enter our IPv4 address. So let's navigate back to our overview, click on VPS information and copy our IP address. Let's paste it in right here. We need to add our root password, which you have set when you installed your hosting server. But if you forgot it, you can simply change the SSH password right here. I'm going to leave it empty right now because it is not hidden. Otherwise, you will see my password. The port needs to be 22. The tech stack that we're going to use is a LAMP. The database that I want to use is MySQL as well. And I'm also going to add Node.js to my server. So I just got out the part where I have added my password. So let's click on Connect Now. Alright, as you could see, we're connected to our VPS. Now the installation part might take a bit. So once again, pause the video and I will see you back once this is done. Alright, as you could see, our environment has been set up and there are so many configurations you could see and configure right here. From databases to server load to memory usage, swap memory, application users, and way more. I can't cover these all, so I want to continue on by setting up our project. I want to deploy my project through Git. So let's click on Back to Servers because I want to click on Integrations right here because I want to deploy my project through Git. So let's click on Git where right here you can link your GitHub account. So let me actually quickly delete the previous one that I had. All right. Now, once again, let's click on link GitHub. All right, as you can see, my account has been successfully linked to server avatar. The next thing that we need to do is to create a new application. So let's first click on our server. Let's open the server. Let's click on applications in the sidebar and let's create a new application. So I'm going to make a test domain where my application name will be Hostinger Livewire. The test domain will be Hostinger Livewire as well. We need to select a method and how we want to deploy our project into our application. So we just linked our GitHub repository and I have added my project in Git. So the most obvious reason for me is to use the Git option. Then we need to select the provider, which will be GitHub in my case. The repository type for me at the moment is public. So let's click on public, where we simply need to clone the HTTPS URL. So if we navigate back to our repository, click on code, say HTTPS, copy it, navigate back to server avatar, paste our HTTPS URL right here, select the branch that we want to use, which in our case will be master as well. Now we can add a deploy script right here, but I simply want to continue on because it's a simple deploy. So let's click on create application. Whoops, I think I just made a mistake. I had to add a dash right here. All right, create application. Well, apparently I need to enter the branch as well. I thought the default one would be master. Create an application. All right, it's finally loading, meaning that we did something right. All right, it has prompted us with a message saying our Git application has been cloned successfully. But if we think about it for a moment, there are some steps we have missed, right? We haven't created a database and we most definitely haven't set it up. So the way we could do that is clicking on File Manager in the sidebar. Let's scroll down for a moment, open the public_HTML, where you will see that our Laravel application has been cloned successfully because, well, I'm actually seeing a Laravel project right here. So the next thing that we need to do is setting up a database and adding the .env file for the credentials. Let's navigate back to our application. Let's click on Databases in the menu. And let's click on Create a new database. So the database name that I want to give it is Hostinger_Livewire. I'm going to set a custom username and password, where I'm going to copy the username and I'm going to keep it as it is. And I want to give it a password of something very secret. Now let's click on Create a Database and give it a moment. As you can see, we have been prompted with a message saying that our database has been created successfully. So what we could do right here is navigating back to our server, open our application, click on the application that we have cloned, open the File Manager, scroll down, open the public_HTML, and I'm actually going to toggle the Show Hidden Files checkbox because I need the .env.example file right here. So the first thing that I want to do is selecting it and I want to rename it to .env. Well, let's open it. And let's change up a couple credentials. The database name was Hostinger_Livewire. The username was the one that I copied and my password was test1234!! Then we need to change the application name, which is Hostinger Livewire. And let's actually open a new tab for a moment because we need to set our app_URL as well, which you will see as our primary domain right here. So let's copy it, navigate back to the file editor, paste it right here. Now let's scroll down let's click on Save Changes, give it a couple seconds. All right, let's save it. If we open a new tab and open the URL that we just copied, you will see that we have been prompted with a forbidden message. This is happening because Laravel doesn't really understand our project structure, and we can change that by creating a new hidden file inside our project named .htaccess. So let's open our file editor again. Let's go back, open the public_HTML folder again. Let's create a new file. Let's name it .htaccess. All right, give it a moment. Let's toggle the show hidden files. Let's open the .htaccess file. And right here, I'm gonna paste a piece of code, which I will add as a comment as well, since it is very easy to make mistakes with an .htaccess file. So just follow along or copy it from the comment or from my repository. So let's save the changes. Click on yes, I'm sure. Navigate back to our local host and refresh it. You will see that we have received a 500 error, and I can tell you why. If we navigate back to our file editor for a moment and go back once again, open the public HTML, show the hidden files in the .env file, you will see that our app key has not been set, and that's why we can't open our project. So what I recommend to do is simply navigating back to our hPanel overview, copying our IP address, navigating to the terminal, say SSH, the user root at the IP. I do want to use a fingerprint, so let's say yes. My password is a password that I have added myself. And as you can see, I have been connected. So what I need to do right here is change directories into my home directory. If I perform an ls, you will see a code with Dari directory. So let's say cd code with Dari. If we perform another ls, you will find the directory that we have created ourselves. So let's say cd hostinger, another ls, open the public directory, perform another ls where you will see a Laravel project. So pretty straightforward right here. Let's say composer update. All right, it's installing all packages that are required. Then we need to run the php artisan key generate command. Finally, we can run the php artisan optimize clear command. Once we navigate back to the browser, we are right here. You will see that our project has been opened inside the browser. Now this was it for the final video of my Livewire video series. Once again, don't forget to use my discount code of Code with Dari when you're going to subscribe to a new Black Friday hostinger plan, where you will get an additional 10% discount. If you do like my content and you want to see more, I'll leave this video a thumbs up, and if you're new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button.